Hello, it is on this day, July 7th, 2022, that I am talking about my introduction to the LGBTQ plus community. The big picture here and why I'm doing this video is because I want to cover my overall journey. I want to cover my coming out. I want to cover how I found myself. The problem is because of how I found myself, I have to break it into parts. It's too long. It took me, I would say, if you were to kind of look at the big picture, we're looking at 5 years. 5 years of me already introduced to the community, but being so utterly lost and kind of closed-minded towards myself that I never ever was able to label myself or really recognize anything until first year of college. So there's a long time period in there, and I really want to talk about each of these things, but I cannot. If I do one big video, it's going to be a long ramble. It's going to be well over an hour long, maybe 2, and I don't want to do that. I want to actually take my time to talk about this. And so this is pretty much part 1, and this is just me talking about, hey, I grew up a very particular way, and I'm glad I grew up the way I grew up in a way, and I just want to talk about that as a sort of introduction to the big picture, because it kind of sets the stage. It kind of tells you what kind of environment I had before I started considering things towards myself, or not considering things towards myself. We'll get into that. The one thing I want to say here right at the beginning is that if there's a particular part you want to hear about next, then go ahead and tell me. I can just tell it in order, or I can say whatever people want to hear the most. So if you want to hear specifically my confusion with my ace identity, or my sex repulsion blocking me for several years, or if you want to hear specifically about the first time I was finally getting over the ideas that society kind of taught me and deciding, okay, it's deciding things, or gender identity, which that one can already be hours in and of itself. Sexuality and gender. You can pretty much say which one you want to hear about more. Sexuality is the one that took a lot longer, for sure. A lot longer. But yeah. With that, dive into the beginning. How did I learn about the LGBTQ plus community? Well, in a way, I grew up with it. In a way. Why do I say in a way? Well, I didn't know the words. I didn't know it was a community. I didn't know it was a minority. That's how I grew up. My parents weren't necessarily teaching it to me. They pretty much never spoke about it. But I knew that we had family member that was lesbian and loved her girlfriend or wife. I don't actually know, but she babysat me for a while, and I just accepted that as how things were. And so I knew of someone who was that, but I didn't know there was a word for it, and I didn't know that was a big deal. I grew up thinking, oh, just some people are that way, and that's fine. That's how I grew up. Again, it wasn't my parents teaching me that. That's just what I saw with my own eyes and how I grew up. And it kind of expanded as I went into middle school, I would say middle school. Just watching media. I'd be like, it just felt normal. On some level in my brain, I'd be watching something, and I would think, oh, I wonder if those two guys are going to be together. Just because I thought that was typical. And usually that wouldn't happen because a lot of media is straight. But I just thought that was typical and normal. I just thought it was normal. Especially I started to get into anime in middle school for a while. I'm going to call it a phase because honestly it was kind of an anime phase. It was mostly because my friend group liked it and I wanted to fit in. Oh, that's a whole story. But watching anime, there was certain animes that really teased that. They were queer baiting, but I didn't know that at the time. And those also reinforce that idea, oh, this is typical, normal, happens all the time. I just thought it was normal. That's how I kind of grew up. It's kind of weird. During middle school, I met a friend who identifies as trans, and I think when I met them, hold on, I'm having a brain fart. When I met them, I think they used any all pronouns. I think they use they, he, they right now. But I haven't talked to them in a while, so I'm sorry if I'm outdated. Just want to say that right now. I'm sorry if I'm outdated. But in middle school, I had a trans friend. To be honest about it, they were an adult. I was like 14, but they were an adult. And they were just someone I knew in like a fandom I enjoyed. And we would just chat about that. And they were just very open about who they were. And I was just able to be there and support them for who they are. And we didn't much talk about it. I mean, I just acknowledged it as how things were. Just the same as like with the like seeing a lesbian person and like just generally thinking, oh, same-sex love is just typical. I did the same thing. I thought, oh, people having gender different from the sex, typical, normal. I learned intersex right at the same time. Typical, normal. That's just how I perceived my world. And so I didn't know that there was an issue. When I say that, I mean I didn't know that these groups of people were oppressed. I didn't know that they're, again, were considered a minority. I didn't know there was violence against these groups until later on when my friend had something happen to them and I found that out. And that was kind of an awakening for me, and that's when I started to realize, oh, this is something that you just don't talk about to people out loud all the time, which is what I was getting from the group of people I knew. That's when I started to realize, oh, maybe this is like a group of people. And so going into high school, that was like 8th grade, so straight into high school over a summer, I was talking to my biology teacher when we were doing, is it Peregrine diagrams? Something like that. I'm sorry, I haven't taken biology in literally 5 years. We were doing the diagrams that determine like a person's like sex, you know, like the male, female, male, whatever, the little chart square thing. You remember that thing? That thing. We were doing that, and my teacher came by, and I was like, but what about intersex? I literally asked her because I was tentative, I was scared. I was waiting for my partners to be like distracted so they wouldn't hear me, because again, I was scared to talk about this after hearing about what happened to my friend. I'd like quietly ask like, what about intersex though? Because I know that's a thing. I'm sure people heard me. And she was like, come into this room on Friday during lunch, which is not at all ominous. But I did what she said. I left class, blah, 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 blah. Friday comes around, get my lunch, go to the room, and I ended up in my first Gender and Sexuality Alliance meeting. Because she happened to be the head of that. And I think that is an amazing coincidence, and that is pretty much what set me on this path. So thank you, biology teacher, for everything you did without realizing you did it. But yeah, I showed up at my first GSA meeting, and it was literally like 4 people than the teacher. It was a really small community, but again, it was normal to me. I honestly, walking in, I was like, oh, these are just the people I've always known. And we didn't really talk about it that much. Like, we had some meetings where we'd give presentations about different labels. We had some meetings where we'd play games. We had some meetings where we would, like, talk about each other's experiences, and, like, if someone had, like, a bad experience regarding their identity, then we would be there for them. But the first day and a lot of other days, we kind of just chatted like a group of friends. It wasn't always about labels and identities. It was just about just sticking together and just being friends. And so I participated in that every single week for 2 years. with a few exceptions because of makeup tests, because high school. But I went to a lot of GSA meetings, and I learned a lot in those meetings. But at the same time, a lot of that information didn't retain because I thought I was cishet. And so, because I thought I was an ally, I didn't really memorize a lot of the words. Some of them I did, but other ones were like too confusing for me to understand at the time. And so when I needed some of those words later, I didn't know them. I knew a lot of gender identity ones, but when it came to asexuality, I didn't know any of those labels, period. Not a single one. And it wasn't until senior year that I found the word demisexual. And while we possibly may have talked about it in the meetings, I didn't remember it. And so while I was able to get a lot of education and support and learn a lot from that group, I still didn't learn necessarily what I needed to be able to identify myself. And that's what confused me later on. But overall, I am so happy I joined GSA in high school. I was really glad that that was a society at my school. It's a pretty tiny school compared to like my parents' schools, and it's on a military academy, my high school. And so when I found out again that this was like a minority, like something you like don't talk about to people, I was a little bit scared because I didn't know what other students would think. But it seemed overall that we had a pretty okay school. We had schools. We had some problems with like certain people. You know, some people were jerks, but it seemed for the most part that we could resolve that for them all the time. Like a teacher would stand up and then it would stop. I didn't see a lot of bullying, with a few exceptions for people outside the community that have a different reason they were bullied. But I didn't see a lot of it. And because I got worried that it was going to be a thing for me, just because I was supportive, I joined No Place for Hate, which is like another society of my school that covers all minorities. And we talk about how you talk about people with disabilities and we'd have discussions on like how America is doing on different divides on issues and being more accepting of people of color and those kinds of things. So I joined that society as well, and then right after that, GSA decided to go public with its first like big school event. And what we did was celebrate Day of Silence. And so we dressed in all red. I did this like black lipstick X because X, and it looked terrible. And we swore to silence for the day. And it was kind of funny because all of us were carrying these little whiteboards so we could answer questions if the teacher called on us, or we could tell people we were participating in Day of Silence. And all of us kind of met up outside the biology room during lunch, and we were just like all writing to each other. And I don't remember it specifically, so this might be a lie. But if I remember correctly, someone came up to us and was kind of a jerk. Kind of a jerk. They didn't really understand what they were being a jerk about, but they were being kind of a jerk. And so we kind of like whiteboard shoved this guy away. It was very funny looking back. It wasn't funny in the moment, but looking back it's kind of funny because it wasn't actually an issue. I don't know if that makes sense, but I lived a lucky life. I lived a really, really, really lucky life because I grew up thinking these things were normal. I didn't think that anything was wrong with me when I actually considered these things. I wasn't bullied for these things, mostly because I didn't know what I was. And I didn't see a lot of bullying firsthand. I knew of my friends getting bullied, but a lot of the time it was like getting them out of that situation, helping them, or supporting them through it because there isn't anything we can do, especially in the case where someone's parents are homophobic. But we were there for each other, and that was a lot of what I saw, was that being there, and not like anything against me personally, because again, I didn't know what I was yet. So, very lucky life. I lived a lucky life, and I'm glad I was able to help people. I was glad I was able to participate in Day of Silence and pretty much like be out and loud about it. For not loud, be silent, to recognize the people who are silent. But I'm glad I did those things. I think it was one of the first things that made me grow significantly as a person. So, very nice. There was a queer formal. I did not attend it. I was too scared. So while this was my community, I still just thought I didn't fit in because I was an ally. And sometimes I just felt weird about it. And again, I wasn't really much of a self-explorer. And I'll get into that in the part of my blockades. But I didn't really know much about myself. And so a lot of those things I didn't participate in. But yeah, No Place for Hate, GSA, right in high school. And obviously, junior year, I was very busy, so I didn't go a lot. And then COVID happened at the end of my junior year. So it was just quit altogether. And then senior year, it was online, and I would only join it sometimes because online lunch, I would take a lot longer to make my food than I would in high school where you just go down the line and get your food. So I miss a lot of those meetings, but I joined sometimes. It was usually like 2 people. Junior year, I want to say this. Junior year, while my freshman and sophomore year, there was like 5 to 7 people. Junior year, it exploded. I could not tell you why, but junior year, the amount of people freaking exploded in GSA. And it was like, there was one day I went in, and it had to be over like 20 people. Blew my mind. Some of them were my friends, and I was open enough to tell them about the club, and they joined because I knew they would be supportive of it. Very few people, for reference. A lot of other people, I would like whisper GSA, and when they would ask what that is, I'd be like, I can't tell you, it's kind of a secret. I'm that person. I did feel like it was a secret club. I felt like I wasn't allowed to talk about it, so a lot of the time I didn't. But the few people that I did tell about it, I was like, yeah, I know you like this teacher, and I get the clue that you're supportive, and so just go to her room on Friday. And we go to her room on Friday. There was like 20 plus people. And again, I couldn't go because I was so busy, but it blew up, and then COVID happened. So I'm glad to see that it grew so much. I was kind of shocked by that, but at the same time, I'm like, yes, more people. That's what we need. So I really hope that right now the club is thriving, even like, especially with what's been happening recently. I'm hoping that that is a safe place, a safe society for all the students at my high school, including my sister. I don't know if she's participating in it, but maybe. So yeah, senior year, online, I wasn't able to do much. And so junior and senior year, when I wasn't in GSA, is when I started to get into myself, because it was less about, oh, I'll support these other people, more like, is this me? Question mark? And that leads into next time. I will see you all then. And yeah, I'm really happy things turned out this way for me. And I mean, yeah, I lived a lucky life. Like, I've had my moments, I've had threats happen to me before, but at the same time, it is nothing compared to what the majority of people face. And all the things that I usually felt terrible about, and insert all the really negative words here, were not to do with my identity, because really all of that hit in college. So I'm not going to be able to say the words I want to say here, but I just want to say that those people are so freaking strong. I cannot convey. I was there for a lot of those people sometimes, and they're just so freaking strong, and go them for being able to go through it, and even at times when they thought they couldn't. I cannot understand it. I really can't, because I've never been on that road, but it is a real thing. The statistic of LGBTQ plus people who consider committing suicide or attempt suicide is really, 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 really fucking high. and we need to fucking fix that. So I just want to include that right here at the end. Support those people, please. Just speak out. That's really the first step, is to just talk about this. Talk about this, especially when it starts coming up in politics. Please and thank you. That is my TED Talk. I will end it here. Have a good one. Bye-bye.